The first 12-team college football playoff bracket is out. Georgia is the 2 seed. They will play the winner of Notre Dame and Indiana in the Sugar Bowl. Dean, initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think the committee dug themselves a hole and got themselves, because of the last 3 weeks of the season, they bailed themselves out, particularly with SMU making it close last night. With Georgia winning and SMU, those were the two things that made the difference. I think if you're Georgia and you look at this bracket, Notre Dame's going to be harder than people think.
We're looking at the bracket right now.
They're definitely going to be more challenging than people will give them credit for in these parts. But I think this is about as good. You did not want to re-deal with Texas. I mean, on the good news for Georgia, as an old tennis guy, you look at the bracket. They're the best team on this side of the bracket.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, and like probably clearly, but that's my opinion.
I think Georgia got. Now, it's still challenging. It's not going to be easy, but I think Georgia got the easier side of the bracket.
Oh, it's not right what happened to Oregon.
It isn't right what happened to Oregon.
No.
They're going to have to play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee.
Right.
Ohio State is the home game. The home team up. It will be up there in Columbus.
I'm so curious for these lines. I'm not even lying.
I'm curious too. They were talking about how weather will be an advantage for Ohio State in that game. It gets cold in Knoxville. It's not like it doesn't get cold in Knoxville, but. Yeah, look, I mean...
Kirk Herbstreit was very negative about Ohio State playing that game at home, but go ahead.
Yeah, Joel Klatt is going off on Twitter.
What's his problem?
Just saying that they might as well have laid down and lost the Big Ten championship last night if this is how they were going to be rewarded for it.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I agree. Someone was going to... So, the good news there's a couple good news. We don't know what the situation with Carson is yet. We'll talk to Kirby a little bit later today. And then... But they needed the time off, so Oregon's earned the time off. The way that we're doing these seedings and the buys is unacceptable, and that's just got to stop.
I know it's contracted to be this way next year. This has got to end. They've got to figure out a way to change this immediately. I don't see why you can't.
You can't have two non-top 8 teams getting buys.
No, I mean, Boise State is the 9 and Arizona State is the 12 in the rankings. And like Nick Saban just said, obviously, we just watched it and we got in the car immediately to record. Nick Saban was just talking about it. He said, look, in any other tournament-style format, it is the top teams that get buys. In the NFL, it's the top teams that get buys. It's like that across the board, and it's not like that in this situation, but it's what we have to deal with. It's wrong, but it's what we have to deal with. So Georgia's on the side, and I would
still say Oregon probably should emerge from that. But if you were wondering why last night mattered, Texas's situation is more complicated. Now, Texas should get to the semifinals. I wouldn't say no problem, but I would say they should get to the semifinals. I mean, Clemson can beat Texas. Clemson would have to play their best game, no mistakes. Texas would have to turn it over twice. I mean, they can go down there and win because I think maybe they can stop Texas running the ball, but Texas will be like a 7-point favorite, 10-point favorite to win that game. But then they play Arizona State and I guess in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think that's going to be in Atlanta. That's the way I think it'll shake out.
I think it has to, because Boise will get to choose, and they're not going to choose Atlanta.
That was quite the spectacle.
That would be bad if you were Texas and you had to. Here's the other thing, just like looking forward, if you're Georgia now, you avoid the scenario of playing Texas in Dallas in a semifinal, and I can damn sure assure you that Oregon is not going to play Texas in the semifinal in Dallas. So if you're just looking ahead, and these videos are about making people smarter and all that, you should be prepared to play in the Cotton Bowl. A game Georgia's not played in a long, long time. If you win one game, it should be the Cotton Bowl.
Exactly. If it ends up being Texas and Oregon or Texas and whoever, no one's picking that game to be in.
Because
it could be Ohio
just as
State.
It stands. Well, but then so here's the thing to remember on this, okay? Is that Georgia is the 2, so then they get to choose who plays where, and so in the scenario where Oregon loses and they get tripped up by Ohio State or Tennessee, Georgia then becomes the dictator as it relates to if they're in the semifinals. Georgia's the 2; they get to dictate. I would imagine, certainly if they were playing SMU, they would not play in Dallas. That's their hometown. So if you're playing Penn State or something like that, I would imagine, if Oregon does not, if Oregon's in this thing, well, in any scenario, Oregon may choose Miami. Well, they certainly would choose Miami if they're playing Texas.
They'll choose
if they're
Miami.
not, they certainly would choose Dallas.
Yeah.
And then secondly, that's going to be what this is going to be dictated about. So nonetheless, Georgia was mandated to go to the Sugar Bowl. It was something they had to do. The Rose Bowl had to take Oregon, so Oregon gets to go to the Rose Bowl to play the winner of Tennessee. Ohio State, that would be a great matchup for Tennessee to go to the Rose Bowl. That'd be a phenomenal season. But for Georgia, I mean, we don't know what the situation is yet with Carson. We'll see. There's a lot of guessing out there. I will just let Kirby do his thing. But I don't know. I mean, I think you're okay right now if you're Georgia.
Yeah. Just
kind of in their position.
I think just telegraphing. Yeah. I just think telegraphing this and looking and just kind of making assumptions. You would think that Penn State wins that matchup at home against SMU. It's not a guarantee, but you would think that Notre Dame wins that matchup.
They should.
Georgia, Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. I got to look into that a little bit more. Notre Dame is a running foot. This is a team that wants to run the football. It's a team that has a powerful quarterback that they like to use in the running game with Riley Leonard. It's a pretty good defense that wasn't extremely tested over the course of the season, but shut down a lot of okay teams, bad teams. The defense played pretty well. They had the mishap against Northern Illinois. That wasn't necessarily a defensive mishap, but if it ends up being Boise State, if Georgia, wins the game in New Orleans, they're going to end up playing Boise State or Penn State or SMU. It just, to me, they got the easier side of this bracket. They're avoiding, until potentially in the national championship, they are avoiding Oregon. They are avoiding Tennessee. All right, you don't like rematches. I know Georgia just won one. You're avoiding Ohio State. You're avoiding Texas. I think Arizona State's not a bad team. You're avoiding that as well. To me, just seeding-wise, it's Oregon, that should have probably got this easier side of the bracket, and Georgia that should have gotten the more difficult one. That's just kind of the way that.
It's not right.
But it's not great. But in terms for Georgia, this is. There's not much better that it could have worked out, the way that this bracket laid out.
There's no question, Ryan. And let me just say this real quick. Our buddies at Red Zone are going to be open all through the holidays. Make sure that you're checking out Red Zone. They got a lot of stuff. You've seen the ugly Christmas sweatshirts I've worn. I've not worn it, but they're on the site. But I did want to say this while you are going downtown shopping. If you look at this bracket, Ryan, how many college football playoff appearances are in the upper half? And how many are in the bottom? The answer is, outside of Georgia, Notre Dame's played in it twice.
And
total.
They got thumped twice, right?
Clemson's won 2 national championships. Ohio State's won 1. Oregon has been in the initial college football playoff. They are the 1 seed as well. You've got Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas, Clemson, and Oregon. Those are brand names. And then you have Arizona State. The brand names on the other side, you've got 3 brand names, which is Georgia, Penn State, and Notre Dame. One of these is not like the other. Georgia is not like Penn State and Notre Dame in that they've been successful. So, I think that's why last night mattered so much. But again, I'm not going to stop saying this. I pointed this out from the start when I saw the stupidity. These we got to go 1 through 12. I think it's okay if you say the ACC champion, the all conference champions are in. I'm okay with that. Like the conference champion gets in. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with buys at all. I'm not okay with buys.
It's tough. Cool. I get why they wanted to do this. I understand why they wanted to do this. They wanted to make it seem like these conferences are equal. They wanted more incentive for winning the conference.
Well, they had to make the thing happen.
Yeah, they had to make it happen, and this was the way to get everyone to jump on board and do it quickly. It doesn't mean it's right. It's definitely going. If it's not this year, it's going away. Or next year, it's going away the year after that. But this is what it is right now, and it just isn't right. So, but you gotta like it if you're a Georgia fan. You gotta like the way
you don't mind it if you're Texas,
and you don't. No, you don't.
It's not the end of the world. I mean, they're going to be closer to Atlanta than Arizona State. So
yes,
you got to get past Clemson, which should be a manageable task if you're Texas.
I think so.
Texas can still win the national championship, okay? The betting line, the numbers now are Oregon narrowly, and then Georgia narrowly, and then Texas narrowly. So those 3 are still there, but like that Ohio State, Oregon potential in the Rose Bowl. There's going to be a pile of Buckeyes out there. That will be an even split. That will not be like playing in Eugene, A. B, if they were to play Tennessee, you'd still have a ton of you might have as many Tennessee folks as Ohio State folks out there. So, Tennessee, my brother-in-law, who I love Wes, they're clamoring for a situation. That's just a horrible quadrant for those three teams. And whoever emerges from there is going to have some scars to show for it. I don't know who comes out of that quadrant.
No, it could be any of those.
It should be Oregon.
It should be Oregon. Oregon's been the best team. It just has.
But that Penn State is having to play in Boise's office. I mean, it's just
Penn State.
Stupid.
Penn State got a better draw. Obviously, they don't have the bye, but they got a better draw on this as the camera keeps shifting.
Sorry,
they got a better draw than Oregon and Ohio
They did.
State.
What's
and
the
they
point?
lost to both of those teams.
What's the point of doing this if we're not going to make it make sense? What's the point? Oh, I see what's going on. What's the point of, competing if you don't... Oh, sorry. What's the point of competing if you don't get the, if you don't get the benefit of winning, what's the point of keeping score? And, I'm not the only person that said this. I just know I've said it out loud for a long time. Back to Georgia, if the offensive line plays the way that they did last night, Ryan, if the defense plays the way that they did last night, they're the best team in college football. What we don't know, and we'll see the severity of Carson's situation. I mean, if he doesn't have to have surgery, my suspicion is you're not talking about something uber serious. Keep in mind the national championship game is still 6 weeks from today. That's half a season. So we don't know what we don't know with Carson. And I'm not suggesting I know something at all, but we've got a long way to go. The guy went back out there. So I was surprised to see him in uniform. And a guy went back out there. And, I just...
Pleated a handoff with his right arm.
Right hand. Yeah. So I'm a little confused as to what's really, really going on. I will say that, and I shoot Carson a lot. Like, he is the person that I photograph more than anyone. His celebrations are not, we got to work on those, be a little bit better. Matthew Stafford had great celebrations. Same thing with Matthew and with Aaron.
Stetson had some good ones.
Stetson had really good ones. Carson's more subdued. He doesn't, do any. Well, last night, instead of both hands going up, only one hand went up on that championship play. So, as you photographed, he was adjusting his face mask, moving his hand. So I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
know.
We don't know.
He had movement.
We might get to find out a little bit more later. I kind of doubt there's a serious update, but we're going to try to get that for you.
Well, it'd be in Georgia's best interest to give us the most comprehensive updates so they do not have insanity out there.
Yes, because
that would be my opinion.
Which is probably not what we're going to get, but it is. That's just how these things work here in Athens. But
otherwise you're going to have stuff running rampant for 3 weeks.
Whether it's Carson, whether it's Gunner, obviously, look, Carson's their best quarterback. He's clearly the best thrower of the football on the roster with experience. And the thing with Gunner is he does, I think, open up the run game for them a little bit. It was obvious last night that he opens up the run game, and you have to respect the fact that it could be him that's the one that takes off. You have to respect the fact that if they're in an empty set, it could be a quarterback draw. He brings different things to Georgia's offense, so you're not in total freak out mode if Carson's out for part or all of this, but you'd rather have your starting quarterback out there.
But the question,
like Dean said in our group chat earlier, look, he's the starter for a reason. He's the guy that's out there for a reason. He's an NFL prospect for a reason. He's still a first-round guy in my eyes for a reason. And either way, we're talking about the best coach and program in college football.
They outcoached Texas
getting
last time.
23, 24, 25 days until this next football game. A lot of guys are going to be able to be rested during this. Yeah. If it is Gunner and they figure that out pretty early in this process, they're going to have more time to prepare for that situation.
They'll know worst case scenario by tomorrow.
And another side note is that Gunner Stockton is Mike Bobo's guy a little bit there. And there's a big connection there. And Bobo going to Georgia is a big reason why Gunner went to Georgia, originally a South Carolina commit.
Yep.
up in Northeast Georgia, right there, top right corner. And so there are positives to if it is Gunter. Now, obviously, you want to be Carson, but these are teams that Georgia can beat, right? The teams that you get concerned with just looking at it, just looking at it through Georgia scope, you get concerned about a potential matchup with Ohio State because there is physicality there, and there are a ton of just stars on the outside on both sides of the ball. You get concerned with Oregon for the same reasons, and you get concerned with Oregon because of how dynamic their quarterback and experienced their quarterback is. You get concerned about having to play Texas a third time, right? Yeah. You get concerned about having to play Tennessee again on a neutral field. That would be a tough matchup. I think Georgia would win it.
Get to the point, though.
Yeah, but my point is, you're not as concerned about Notre Dame, Indiana, SMU, and Penn State because they just haven't been as scary as those teams.
You can't play Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon. You can only play one of them. Yeah. You can only play one of them.
And it would be in Atlanta.
That's true. Forgot about that part. This is the unjust part for Oregon. Like, this is not fair. Do not get confused. They are the number 1 overall seed. And I have to say they have the most difficult path. It's not right.
They do. Out of all of the 4 byes, they got the toughest, like, whether it's Tennessee or Ohio State, they got the toughest combination of who they're going to have to play. And that's not how these things work. It's not. Ridiculous. I don't usually scream on here, but it's just, this is not how sports brackets work.
It's not right. It's not right.
They had an opportunity to make this exactly the way they wanted to make it. And this is what they chose.
So this is my point.
This is what they chose.
Weeks ago, they set this up for failure. See, that's what they did. And they were bailed out because of Alabama losing. Not exclusively Alabama losing, okay? But Georgia winning, Clemson winning, cleaned some things up for them. But specifically Georgia beating Texas gave them the capability to say, we'll knock Notre Dame down. You know, we'll avoid some kind of nutty things. Tennessee should be probably hosting Ohio State. Just my take, but that's me. You know, but that you can't get, you know, if you're Tennessee, you're in it and you get a shot to go. But this is not right. And it's not right. And I'm not honking for the SEC. I'm honking for Oregon right now. And I'm honking for this has got to be better. We have to be better than this. This is not acceptable. And, you know, but, you know, for Georgia, you know, can they get to the championship game with Gunter Stockton? That's what people want to know. Can they win the national championship with Gunter Stockton? They can certainly get to it. But he's going to have to play better than he did last night. Yes. Now, he played pretty well last night.
Given the circumstances.
Yes. But he would have to play better than he did last night. The interception was really bad. Yes. But they were explosive with him, man.
They were explosive, like we said.
Not with the pass, though.
Not with the pass, and almost all the passes.
And then we don't know what's going on with the Australian punter either. See, Brett Thorson.
No, and
that's
with
a problem.
The way it looked, it looks like it looked like he wasn't going to be able to play the rest of the year. But we'll just see about that. Yeah, with Gunter, the passing there was a lot of behind the line of scrimmage. There was a lot of within 5, 6, 7 yards. I think that he threw an air yard 10 plus yards maybe 3 or 4 times, and one of them was that interception. So that's not ideal if that's what the offense is going to look like with him. They'll have 3 weeks to prepare for that with him. And look, you and I, Matt, we've seen him. I probably saw him the most out of the 3 of us just in high school because I was up. Yeah, and I saw him when he was younger too. So this is a guy that can launch it too. Right?
No, he's
the best throw that I saw him make in high school was when we went to watch him play, and that obviously there's other throws.
Up at Raven.
No, when we watched him play at Jefferson. Against Sammy Brown and Malachi Starks. Yeah. And he was on the run, and he put one on the money, 40 to 45 yards downfield on a go route. He's got it in his bag.
He's good now.
He just has to settle down and do it. He doesn't have the arm that Carson has. No. That's a 100% professional football throwing arm. But he does bring the element of the run game. And another thing that Dean and I talked about at lunch earlier, Trevor Etienne being back. Doesn't that matter? And they'll be able to run the RPOs more effectively with Gunter. So you don't have to completely, yes, they can win these games with Gunter Stockton. It's just not their ideal situation.
No, you want your best players. I mean, you don't want to lose Etienne and Thornton and Carson Beck. You're not Georgia at that point. But I think, can you win it? Yeah. I mean, if the defense is only going to allow 2 touchdowns or something like that, or 1 touchdown a game, Yeah, there's no one in this field that Georgia should be like, man, I don't know about that. I don't know if we can beat them. They can beat everybody. In fact, I don't know that everybody can beat them, but they can beat everybody. And no one's gone through what these guys have gone through. Now, we can continue to say that and point that out, and that's great and everything, but the problem is, I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth here. That's great and it gets you ready, but that that goes out the window at some point. You have to go and execute. Like you have to, like, you can't rely on we've had the hardest run. That inherently gives you calluses and it makes you tough and all that stuff, but you got to go do it and execute. There were a few moments last night when Georgia could have put the game away and they did not. And, they're really experienced at doing that too, at not putting games away. So Kirby was very honest, I felt like, last night. He said there were some guys he felt like had, it wasn't confidence issues. I can't remember the way he put it, but I think he may have said confident. They're not as confident as they should be. He's right. I mean, like, this team, the moment, it's all there, though. And they should be confident in their ability and all this stuff. But there will not be, from here on out, a Georgia Tech game or a Kentucky game or, stuff like that where they kind of hit it.
There's no more screwing around.
Yeah, there's no more, non-important moments. Yeah. Everything is important from here on out. I think they will recognize that. But, the older guys, this stretch of time, this 3.5 weeks, it's important. And all the screaming and all this, that's not how it is or should be. This is a time where you recalibrate, Tate and all those guys, they got to get right physically, mentally. Those guys need rest. And, you need the running back. Tate Ratledge knows how to play football. We're not worried about his ability to play football. You're worried about getting Tate and Warren Brinson and, Malachi and McCall and all those guys, Smile Mundan, getting that personal foul against Smile Mundan was something else. I saw the replay of that. I was surprised that was, I have to say, if that was not, him, right? I mean, if that was not targeting, I don't know what a personal foul is these days, because I think there was a personal foul they called on Texas with Carson at one point. I was like, all right, they're going to throw it, but anyway, but all those guys, this is a critical time, and you never know. It can be at a team meeting, it can just be guys goofing around. This is the time at which teams get right for the critical moment.
Yeah,
and Gunner got there's been some time in some October, when he was going to Chick-fil-A or something, and the confidence is there in Gunner Stockton, and everybody needs to be prepared to have their moment of confidence too. Yeah, now is the time to get ready for it.
And I want to, whether it's just me or both of us at some point this week, we'll discuss what Trevor Etienne had to say in a little bit more depth, but it's moments like that, right? I've never been a part of something like this. He stood in front of the team and talked to them earlier this week and talked about how important these things are. That's the case for this entire bracket now, right? That's not just the case for Georgia, but out of anybody here, and specifically literally the players on Georgia's football team, there's still some that are national champions, right? They've been in these moments.
They have.
And this is where you see the advantage really show up, is in these situations for Georgia. I think you really like the way that this lined up if you're Georgia. It's not right for some of these teams.
It's not.
Georgia got rewarded for the tough schedule it played this year. That's one way to look at it.
Playing Notre Dame in the quarters is not I'm talking about. I'm talking about because that's a legitimate challenging matchup. I'm talking about, it's not right that Penn State's having to, Penn State has a better path than Oregon. Yeah. It's just crazy to me. Now, they could lose to SMU. I think they'll be a 7-point favorite. So let's just go through this real quick. So Tennessee will be about a touchdown dog. Clemson will probably be 10 or 12-point dog. And Austin, Indiana, Notre Dame is a good question. I think these are all.
I think that Notre Dame's going to be a double-digit favorite.
Hovering around, 7 to 10 points. These are not like championship weekend, which, I was saying when I was writing.
These are on campuses.
Correct. So we know Tennessee's about a touchdown dog. which I think they can handle. I mean, so it's like a 27 to 30%, 33% chance of winning that game.
It's the best matchup in the first round. It's not close.
Well, and if you're just curious to know, because I'm such a TV psychopath, Ohio State, Tennessee is going to be on Saturday night. It will be on at night. It will be a Disney game for sure. I would imagine Penn State SMU is destined for TNT no matter what. And I would say probably Texas Clemson as well. Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, that would be a lot of firepower for Disney, and that would give them the capability of playing that. So I would imagine the Friday night game may well be Notre Dame, Indiana, would be my guess. This may already actually be out. But Tennessee, Ohio State will be your Saturday night game. That will be your Herb Street game. I think that's going to be, I mean, those two states are not that far from each other. And they it's about as far from Georgia to North Carolina. Like, I know they border, but I'm talking about, Georgia to Mississippi. Yeah. And there's plenty of Ohio people in Nashville, and, there's spillover in Kentucky. That will be a huge, huge game. The pressure for Ryan Day.
Yeah.
I mean Josh Heupel's,
his job is potentially on the line.
Yeah, it really is. And that's a tough matchup. They should beat Tennessee, but I'm not like, oh, they're beating Tennessee. It's just, now I'm suddenly got excited because I'm sitting here
excited to watch these games.
Yeah, I mean, I know my wife will be sweating that Texas game. Clemson can beat Texas, but I don't, they're going to need some help on the road. I mean, if it were in Clemson, I would still take Texas. Texas was good, man. Texas is a good team. But
it's a good defense.
Yeah.
It's a very good defense.
But Georgia ran on them. 141 yards. That's solid.
Yeah.
Texas did not put that game away. They definitely dominated the first half, and they were up 6-3.
You're not going to beat Georgia just kicking field goals.
No, you got to score touchdowns.
We saw that this year against Kentucky. You're not just going to beat Georgia kicking field goals. It's not going to be enough.
And guys are missing field goals.
And especially if you're missing field goals, that game's completely different if they don't miss those field goals. And so, yeah, I like Texas in that first round game. I have a hard time seeing Clemson go over there and be able to score.
We've not even talked about Alabama. Go ahead, just real quick. Yeah, I can go 20 minutes into this.
Because I think both of us felt they didn't deserve to be in this playoff.
They don't.
And now, while this is not an exceptional format and this is not necessarily the way that things should look, for what data is given and what the format actually is, I think they got it partially right. That partially being, they can't just punish SMU and not punish Penn State and Texas and all these teams.
I mean, right? I just don't know.
You couldn't just all of a sudden rip SMU out of there just so you can have Alabama in there. Alabama, in November, went to Norman and got destroyed.
Yeah.
Destroyed by a bad offensive football team.
They didn't
deserve to be in.
You lost to two 6-6 teams. There's nothing to talk about. I mean, there's just nothing to talk about. You lost to Vanderbilt, who people are excited about because they're 6-6 and not 3-9. That's not the same thing as being good.
No.
That's 6-6. And yeah, they gave Texas trouble and they did this, that, and the other. South Carolina walked the dog on them, didn't they? Yep. So if you're Carolina, you can say what you want about the LSU game, but you lost the game, and then you lost to. I forgot all their losses, but they got 3 of them.
South Carolina got
destroyed at home.
South Carolina got destroyed by Ole Miss, and then they had a close loss against LSU that was kind of some BS at the end, and then the close loss to Bama.
Correct.
Which was one of the worst offensive football drives I've ever seen. Was the potential game-winning, game-tying drive that South Carolina was trying to put together against Alabama. You lost 3 games.
So
and we thought that there was going to be, and there was a possibility that a 3-loss SEC team would make it. Just missed out in this scenario. It didn't happen. Maybe next season, but it wasn't good enough this time.
It probably won't, y'all.
It wasn't good enough this time.
I don't think so, Ryan. But let me just say this about the Rebels. Look, point blank, you lost to not a good LSU team. It was on the road, it was tight and all that, and so but the Kentucky loss is not acceptable. And
no.
That's a bad Kentucky team. Georgia lost or beat them by a point. Georgia beat them, though.
Yeah.
I mean, they beat Tech by 2. So, I mean, you either win or you don't. And, that's all this is. No one's thinking about Oregon's matchup against Boise earlier in the year, or their matchup with Wisconsin, or there was another one that was way too tight, or Penn State almost losing to USC in overtime.
They almost lost to Minnesota.
Or Minnesota. I mean, Indiana. I think Indiana.
And this is the case for all these teams, right?
Well, I was just going to say the only one, Indiana got, skulls bashed in by Ohio State, but other than that, Indiana's played pretty winning football.
Yeah, it's an interesting
but they've
matchup.
Not really played a lot of team. Georgia, by far and away, has played the most competitive schedule. Then I think Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken. Ohio State's played Oregon, Penn State,
and Indiana.
So Ohio State's tested too.
Yes.
They just have a bad loss to Michigan. I mean, Georgia's played Tennessee, Texas. They're 3-0 in those games. I forgot about Clemson. They played 3 of these teams 4 times. They played 4 games against the 12 teams in this thing. 4 of Georgia's 13. I mean, that's a lot of mental toughness that they had to do. So I don't want to hear about it from Alabama. There really was not a lot of discussion. I don't think the Alabama people, they know. And Vegas knew. And kudos to Brett McMurphy for pushing that out right before the thing. But the announcement. But I think if you're Georgia and you look at this, there's some really good running teams here. There's no super explosive offenses. Notre Dame's better than you think. But Indiana is not dissimilar from Boise, is not dissimilar from Penn State with their style. SMU can score, but Clemson held them down pretty good. And then, this is a good lineup for Georgia. It's just unfair to Oregon in a major way.
Yeah, the bad part for Georgia, I would say, just to flip it around, and you kind of hit on it, the teams that Georgia is going to have to face can really run the football. When you talk about Boise State, we're talking about the best running back in college football. We're talking about a Heisman finalist in Ashton Jeanty. With Penn State, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, that's a really good running back duo. And that's a good, not great offensive line from what I've saw. And Notre Dame, obviously, I'm blanking on their running back's name, but between their running back and Riley Leonard, and Georgia has been susceptible to the run this year. We're talking about 170 yards given up to Jalen Miller on Alabama, 170-plus yards given up to Kentucky, 200 to UMass,
and then the
260, obviously, against Tech. So it's not easy. It's easier than what Oregon has to deal with. But it still has its challenges.
The Big Ten and Big Ten adjacent schools in Georgia's half of this thing, Penn State, Indiana, and Notre Dame, I think their challenge is on the defensive side of the ball, to be honest with you. I mean, with how many points Penn State gave up to Oregon, Indiana getting killed by Ohio State, Notre Dame with SC just running up and down the field. SC is not a good team. So, you got some issues there. Georgia, said, well, they gave up 42 to Georgia Tech. Yeah, in 8 overtimes or whatever it was. So, I think Georgia's gonna have to ride this defense to as far as they can, and we'll just see. Hey, make sure you're checking out Red Zone. Make sure you're signing up for our newsletter. Thanks for watching.